Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Allan Laboucan with the Rocks and Stocks News Show. Prior to turning on the camera today, I had spent over 2 hours writing a report that I accidentally deleted. And instead of writing it over again, everything's fresh on my mind. So I thought I would turn on the camera and do it by video instead. So how I started that report was I was writing about the trends that I'm seeing out there that are very bullish for gold, silver, copper, and other metals. Basically, look at what we're going through. We're seeing a banking crisis. Many people, I think, believe that the lack of infinite wisdom at the Fed and the FDIC and other regulatory bodies, the Treasury, are able to stop a banking crisis in a matter of a couple of weeks. I think that is very far-fetched. In fact, I wrote that this reminds me a lot of the asset-backed commercial paper blowout that happened prior to the 2008 economic crisis. It preceded it by a matter of 7 to 10 months, I seem to remember in my head. And what happened was it ultimately created a contagion that affected the banking sector. We saw some of the household names in the banking sector back then implode and cause a global economic crisis. And I believe that what we've seen recently in the banking crisis is a precursor to a bigger problem. I don't think that we're even close. I think we're just in the start of the first inning of this problem. And one of the reasons that I say that is because if you look at the Federal Reserve, that caused a lot of this problem, in that a lot of this Silicon Valley Bank and a lot of these other smaller banks had loaded their assets up with long-dated treasuries and bonds, and also mortgage-backed securities. And what happened was, after 14 years of near zero interest rates in 2022, the Federal Reserve jacked up interest rates dramatically. When they did that, the assets in these smaller banks went severely underwater. They had to recapitalize. And when the depositors heard this, they started to head for the exits in mass. And you can't really blame them. When you start seeing a bank run, you start worrying about the money you have deposited. And by extension, investors have started to flee as well. The investors in these publicly traded smaller banks. And what we saw happen was that those deposits went into the big banks that people believe are more secure, and they probably are more secure in that the Federal Reserve and the other regulatory agencies, the Treasury, they believe those banks are too big to fail and would bend over backwards in order to protect them. Other things that were done by the Fed and the other regulatory bodies was to backstop or bail out the depositors. And they have, in those troubled banks, the start of the troubling banks is that they guaranteed all the depositors would be safe. And then they also had to start talking about, well, if those depositors are unsafe and need the guarantee, that they may possibly have to guarantee all depositors at all banks. Now that's an $18 trillion bailout, and would require a heck of a lot of money printing to do. Another of their schemes was that they opened the lending up at the Federal Reserve to banks. I can't even remember the acronym for what they call it, but the troubling part of that is that the Federal Reserve is giving them money at par for their underwater assets. You know, I like to keep things simple, and imagine if you were a pawnbroker and somebody came in with a $10,000 retail watch that they just bought and wanted to pawn it off, and they wanted from the pawnbroker that $10,000 retail price, and let's say that they owned it for a couple of years. Imagine how long a pawnbroker could stay in business if they loan money out for used goods at the price at the retail price when the going price was much lower. That pawnbroker wouldn't be in business for very long. And if you look at the Federal Reserve as an ultimate pawnbroker, they also have their own issues in that during the period from 2008 until 2022, they were the key buyer of those same kind of assets, and they are loaded up with a balance sheet that is very similar to a lot of these smaller troubled banks. And yet they want to bluff that they could backstop or guarantee all of the depositors to the tune of $18 trillion. It's kind of unbelievable to me that people actually believe these bluffs. If you were playing cards with the Federal Reserve, it would be a very good time to call their bluff if you have any kind of a hand. And in addition to that, there's a lot of signs that the economy in the U.S. is heading towards a serious recession. You're seeing it in housing sales. You're seeing it in commercial real estate. You're seeing it in big ticket items, automobiles, computers, and other big ticket items are all slowing down. And it's no wonder, because the consumer out there is using their credit cards just to make ends meet due to the inflation that is happening. And they're paying loan shark rates of 19% to keep the economy floating. And these things cannot continue. We are at a very serious situation here in the banking sector, in the how investors can protect themselves against what's happening in the economy. And the central banksters of the world are actually showing you their cards from 2008 and beyond. They have progressively been buying more and more gold. And in 2022 was a record year for the central banksters of the world to buy gold. And I would argue that 2023 is going to blow away 2022 in purchases by the banksters, central banksters. But they're not the only one. That isn't the only problem that's out there. The politicians in the United States have decided that they're going to join the party too, and fight over the increasing of the debt ceiling. Now, I don't care what your politics are, whether you're on the left or the right or down the middle. Politicians like to spend money, and ultimately they're going to raise the debt ceiling. But in the meantime, they are potentially going to cause another problem. At the same time that all of this is happening, central bankers buying gold, the fight over the debt ceiling in the U.S. Political arena, and then you've got much like an animal that is weak, its predators will focus in on the weak. And what we're seeing in the global trade is that BRIC nations, Russia, China, and others are starting to move away from using the US dollar as the means of transactions for commodities and other goods. And I think we're at the verge of a very, how do you say it, an interesting time for the global currency markets. I think that the US dollars run as the key currency, the world, that kind of holds all the trade together, is ending. And you know, it's pretty likely that you're going to see some regions out there, the BRIC nations, the euro, the US dollar, start to compete for international trade. And so I'll now get into the US dollar. And I follow the US dollar so closely because, as you're going to see here, often where the US dollar goes, the most followed price for the US dollar, or for commodities, is what the metals, gold, silver, copper, other metals, other commodities, are doing in the US dollar. That is the most closely watched price there is. And so it is a serious sentiment driver, not only for the metals, but the metals stocks. And as you can see here, the metals traders jumped the gun on the Federal Reserve raising interest rates back in 2021. In around July, it went through a golden cross. It picked up momentum as the Federal Reserve started their aggressive interest rate increases, but then it topped at in September, late September. And what I believe was happening is the currency traders of the world are once again getting ahead of the curve and are anticipating that the Federal Reserve is about to end their rate increases. And this caused a very significant correction until February. In January, it went through a death cross and had a very poor January effect reading. But then in February, early February, there was some employment numbers out that kind of spooked the currency traders into believing that the Federal Reserve was going to continue on these aggressive rate hikes. And it caught a bid going from early February until early March. Then the banking crisis rolled around. And as you can see, here's a little tighter picture. As you can see, since the banking crisis rolled around, the US dollar is back under pressure and is now trading below the 50-day moving average and significantly below the 200-day moving average. So this trend here, I think, is the primary trend, which is a bearish trend. It had a counter trend rally in February and now is back on that correction. And I think with all of these things that are happening in the currency markets, in the alternatives to the US dollar as the world reserve currency and the major currency used for trade in commodities and other products, is about to end. And so then the question becomes, well, what can investors do to protect themselves against the banking crisis, the inflation problem, the US dollar's competitors starting to come around? And I believe for investors out there, the best alternative is to put their money into gold. And let's take a look at the gold chart now. I'm going to switch over to the gold chart. And earlier I made the point that where the price of gold trends to go in the opposite direction of the US dollar. So back in March of 2022, it topped out here, went into a serious correction as the US dollar was gaining strength. Then it had a triple bottom in September, October, and November, and had a very substantial breakout. In January, it had a golden cross, a very bullish golden cross, and a very bullish January effect. Then February rolled around. The US dollar got under pressure, or got into a rally, and as often happens, the price of gold went into a correction. But then in early March, it had another significant rally and has traded three or four times at $2,000 or slightly above. This is becoming a bit of a psychological situation, but I think it's going to break through that 2,000 quite aggressively here in a matter of days, and make a strong move towards 2,500 or higher in 2023. And other factors that affect the price of gold are the supply and demand. So gold has gone through many decades of underinvestment to replace the old mines, and some of them are becoming ancient mines, and with new exploration or underfunded exploration, not enough success in exploration, underfunding of new mine developments, and a lack of success in new mine developments that collectively are not able to replace the old mines. And so you've got this demand that's coming from the central banksters of the world, China and India, which are major consumers of gold, physical gold, are buying it as the banksters are, central banksters are, hand over fist. So you've got very strong demand and weak supply. And so whether you look at this based on an economic argument, a supply and demand fundamentals, these are driving the bullish trend that started in November and has resumed in March after a counter trend move. And, with the direction, now the 200-day moving average is starting to move up, and the 50-day moving average has been on a very impressive trajectory since November. So everything is pointing towards a stronger market for gold. And where gold goes, so goes silver. In fact, so goes all of the metals, and the sentiment towards the metals stocks. Soon I'll talk about metal stocks, but before I do that, I wanted to talk about copper. And copper, as I said, where gold goes often goes the other metals. It also topped out in March, went through a serious correction, had a bottom in July, and then a higher low in September, higher low in October, higher low in November, following a very similar path to gold, and then a major breakout that saw it go through a golden cross in January, and a very strong January effect as well. But then it showed some relative strength since February, and has kind of been going sideways with a little dip here, but primarily sideways since then. And what is affecting copper is the revolution. Well, first of all, China had gone through a long period of COVID lockdowns, and they released those a few months ago, and so they're back to consuming a lot of copper. And the big driver also is the revolution that's happening with electric vehicles. And I think that's an unstoppable force. I think in the not too distant future, the electric vehicles are going to have a much bigger market share, not just domestically in the United States, but also worldwide. And as we're doing that revolution in electronic vehicles, I think something that not very many are talking about is the power grid in the United States. It's old in a lot of places and ancient in other parts of the United States, and it's really not prepared for the electric vehicle revolution, and will, without a doubt, require rewiring to rebuild the aging infrastructure of the power grid. And at the same time, China, India, and other developing economies are also consuming a lot of copper as they modernize. And so whether you're looking at the power grids, the emerging economies, or the electric vehicle revolution, it's going to require a lot of copper. And it has been like gold, and underinvestment in new mines, exploration for new mines, not enough success in exploration, not enough, that which leads to not enough new mine developments, and not enough success in that department to replace the old to ancient mines that are out there. And the miners are not well prepared to service the growing demand from the areas that I earlier talked about. And I really don't think that a lot of people, maybe just even inside the mining sector, really realize how strained the supply chain is. On a short-term basis, you know, for much of my career, the inventories at the metals warehouses throughout the world would have weeks to months worth of supply for the global demand. Now you're down to a day or two. Another thing that I don't think a lot of people remember is that whenever copper prices are strong, is often a time when the Chilean mining community goes on strike demanding higher income. And they watch that price of copper like a hawk. And if the Chilean miners are to go on strike, because Chile is such a major producer of copper, this just-in-time supply of copper is going to have a major problem and see spikes in the price of copper. And I'm not the only one that's recognizing this. Recently, Stellantis, who's not a well-known name in the world, but the brands of cars that they make definitely are. Their brands include Chrysler, Dodge, Ram, Jeep, Fiat, Alfa Romeo, Maserati, and more. And recently they made a unique move for car makers, in that they put $150 million US into McEwen Copper. McEwen Copper is part of the McEwen Mining, and they've got a top 10 undeveloped mine in Argentina. And Stellantis has a pretty big business down in Argentina. And they are trying to get involved on the mining side of things so that they can start to deal with their future needs, their future supply needs. And they're not the only one that is jumping into this party. At the BMO Mining Conference and the Prospectors and Developers annual conferences, these are big mining conferences, the automakers are starting to show up in force. And they are also seeing the writing on the wall that not only is there not enough copper, there's not enough of all the metals that are needed to make electric vehicles. Earlier this morning, I was reading an article by the CEO of Stellantis, who was making comments about the problems with the lithium supply as well. You need a lot of lithium to build those cars, and the supply chain is not well prepared to meet that demand. And this was I've never seen this before in my career, and I've been in the mining business for 30 years, that the car makers are starting to show up at the mining conferences and starting to do deals with miners. And I think that's a trend that it will only ramp up into the future. So the reason I follow copper so closely is because of this electric vehicle revolution and all the copper it's going to need, but also because it acts as kind of a sentiment driver for the other metals out there that are needed, the other base metals. So where gold goes, often copper and other metals goes, and where copper goes, often the base metals go as well. And I think there's a very strong argument to be made to be involved in electric or copper and other base metals. On the other base metals side, not only are we seeing a revolution in automobiles, but there's a bigger move towards alternative energy sources, and they're going to need a lot of metals as well. I was mentioning on one of my recent interviews that I see a very odd situation in that venture capitalists will pour money into technology companies. Sometimes those are social media apps that allow people to share their cat pictures and cat videos. And don't get me wrong, there's other technology that they invest in as well. But what the big point that I'm trying to make is that I don't think a lot of these venture capital firms that invest in technology really realize how much technology needs copper and other raw materials to make the products that they make. And, it boggles my mind that a social media app can get billions of dollars in venture capital investment, but the metals that are needed to make the tech world and the entire world operate need a lot of metals, and we've gone through decades of underinvestment in exploration and new mine development. Economics have a way of fixing a lot of stupidity, and this imbalance in venture capital going towards tech and not towards the raw materials needed to, drive the world, the tech world, and the consumer world, and the entire global economy go under around with their hat in their hand. Something that I am also noticing a trend that I find quite interesting is, for most of my career, when a junior mining company would do a joint venture with a major mining company, the junior mining company would get quite abused by the major mining company. And in the last 6 months or so, I've seen some what I call very junior friendly deals, joint venture deals by the major mining companies with the junior mining companies. And, so the mining companies are understanding how important exploration is. And I think that the earlier I said that I think the best way for people to park their money and protect against inflation and banking crisis and the changes to the currency trading globally is to own gold and silver, for that matter. But I think for investors that want to grow their money, the gold stocks, the silver stocks, the metal stocks are where the real value is, because what I'm seeing now is reminiscent to me of the year 2000. back then, the mining related stocks were trading at record low valuations. And then that was the precursor to 2001, when a decade-long bull market happened. And these stocks went ballistic in some cases and made millions and millions of dollars for investors, billions of dollars for investors. And I think we're at the same juncture right now. We're seeing these metals related stocks, gold, silver, copper, and others that are trading at record lows again. And yet we're at a lot of signals are pointing towards a green light for gold, silver, copper, metal stocks, and a red light for the US dollar. So now we're going to get on to some picks, which is where I really think the most value and the most money will be made. Gold goes up to $2,500, so let's say a 25% gain from where it closed on Friday, and the gold stocks will go up hundreds of percent. So I really think that the opportunity for investors to grow their money is in the metal stocks. Okay, one of my favorite metal stocks is I-80 Gold. I'm pulling up, this is the Canadian symbol. IAUX is their symbol on the New York Stock Exchange. And as you can see here, it's very similar to the action that we saw in gold. It topped in March, had a serious correction, went through a bearish death cross, bottomed out and broke out in November, and then went under some pressure in January and February. Well, you know, this modest correction in January down to the 50-day moving average is kind of reasonable after such a power move from, let's say the bottom here is at $1.98 and it moved up to $4.20 or so in a very short period of time. So that's often going to cause some profit taking. But then February rolled around, and like the price of gold, it got under pressure, traded all the way underneath their 200-day moving average until the banking crisis rolled around, and now it's popped up again and is now trading above the 200-day and the 50-day moving average. I believe that this company has just a litany of catalysts that will drive it forward. What caused this big move was they were announcing the results from their bonanza grade CRD in Eureka, Nevada. Just tremendously high grades of your traditional metals that are known to occur in CRDs, silver, lead, and zinc. But it also has an overprint of extremely high bonanza grades of gold. So if you look at the in situ rock value of what they're finding on their bonanza CRD, it makes for some of the highest grade, highest value of metals being found in any metal anywhere in the world. Anywhere from $1,000 a ton to $5,000 or more dollars per ton, and in their CRD in Eureka, Nevada. And now they have been, over the last couple of months, they've been doing a lot of drilling on that CRD, and they have pending news that could come out any day now. And I believe that based on what they've already drilled and the geological context of that, is that they probably have a lot of great news to come out in the not too distant future. When I say that, it's down to days now, and then a series of news releases after that. Their CRD is not the only great asset that they have at their Ruby Hill project in Eureka, Nevada. They've also got quite a tremendous, to the west of the CRD, they've got this exceptional gold discovery that looks like it could be a world-class gold discovery. So on one project alone, they've got a world-class gold project to on the west side of the claim, And to the south, they've got one of the best discoveries out there for CRD with a high-grade gold overprint. They've also got another great asset at their Granite Creek project, which I think is going to be a 5 million plus ounce high-grade gold mine, and it's sitting right beside a 25 million ounce gold mine. If you want to look for a 5 to 25 million ounce gold project, looking near a 25 million ounce gold project is a hell of a good place to look. And they're getting all the indications that they're looking at something very big at Granite Creek. They have other mines in their portfolio that will be mines in the not too distant future as well. So all of these things combined with their infrastructure that they have for mining at 2 locations puts them into a group of assets that I think will drive them to be a multi-billion-dollar company. And right now they're trading at well under $1 billion. So it's not often that you see a company that it has a under $1 billion valuation that you think could realistically be a $5 to $10 billion valuation in the coming years. But that's the story for i-80 Gold. I'm fortunate to have i-80 Gold as a sponsor of my reports, and therefore I've done a lot of interviews with you and Downey. If you want to do some homework on the company and learn from the horse's mouth, so to speak, you can find my interviews on my YouTube channel at Rocks and Stocks News, and just scroll through the videos and you'll find a bunch of interviews that I've done with you and Downey. Now, another recent development for the company is that another of my sponsors is a company called Paycore Minerals. And i-80 Gold is about to buy out Paycore Minerals. It's in the final stages of all the regulatory approval, the shareholder approval, and it looks like it's maybe about a month away from closing. And that will give them i-80 Gold a tremendously exciting CRD discovery as well, because not very far from where i-80 Gold is finding a bonanza CRD, Paycore also has a bonanza CRD that looks like it could get a lot bigger and become a future mine as well. So that's another potentially world-class project that i-80 Gold is adding to their portfolio, and it's a stock deal at 0.68 of a share of Paycore gets a share in i-80 Gold. And I think that the Paycore shareholders are going to unanimously approve this deal, because ultimately I think that their money will grow more rapidly owning i-80 Gold shares than it will owning Paycore Minerals as a standalone project. And so i-80 Gold and Paycore are about to become one. And I really like the looks of that. Okay, so another company that I mentioned earlier is McEwen Mining. And McEwen Mining, the reason that I mentioned them earlier was because they got a very substantial investment from Stellantis, the car maker for Chrysler, Dodge, Ram, Jeep, Fiat, Alfa Romeo, and Maserati. So McEwen Mining has a 52% ownership of McEwen Copper. McEwen Copper is private. It's not a publicly traded company. And McEwen Mining, or McEwen Copper, has a multi-generational copper mine of the future that has a $150 million investment from Stellantis, which I think is pretty impressive for not just McEwen Copper, but also for Stellantis. They are ahead of their peers in that they are realizing that in order for them to secure the supply that they need of copper, and other metals, they need to get involved with the mining companies, and they got involved with the McEwen Copper in a very big way. At the same day that they announced that Stellantis had made a big investment, they also got a second big investment from a venture of Rio Tinto Mining, which is called Newton. And this was the second big investment by Newton. So what Newton, this venture of Rio Tinto, does is they're looking at proprietary methods to extract copper in a way that will increase the recovery and increase the time to get the copper out of the rock it's in. And so, as you can imagine, this has the potential to be a major effect to the bottom line of a copper mine. So they made an initial investment a few months ago, and I think it was about 20 or 25 million. And then recently, right around here, they announced that I think it was right here, that they announced that they were putting a second and bigger investment. I think the second one was about 30 million. Now, why that's important to me is not just the money amount. It's the fact that in between those two investments, they were able to start the process of assessing if their proprietary extraction method would work on McEwen Copper's ore. I think the fact that they did the second investment tells you that they believe that it will in fact help out the recovery of copper from the rock and also increase the speed to get it out of the rock. And again, that's very important for the bottom line of a copper project. Another thing that I think is very bullish for McEwen Mining is that they've also got, they're also a gold mining company. And in their gold mining operations, mines, they've been bringing down the cost, and they've been getting better grade control. And this is very helpful for the bottom line of those mines. And as gold goes up, it's just more money that goes right to the bottom line of the company. So in McEwen Mining, you get access to gold mining and copper. I think that makes for a very unique situation. It bottomed in August at around $3.69 Canadian, has moved up dramatically. It closed on Friday at $11.39. I made the case back here when I did an interview with Rob McEwen, I think it was right about here, that I think that they were very undervalued for the improvements they were making to their gold mines and also for their copper project. And they've had a tremendous run since then. And I think that they're still very undervalued and a great opportunity for investors. And I've been fortunate to have Rob McEwen do interviews with me. In fact, I recently did one just a couple of days ago. And you can find that on my YouTube channel at Rocks and Stocks News. Okay. Another company, mining company that I'm very bullish on is SilverCrest. Okay, let me pull up SilverCrest here. Where are you, SilverCrest? SilverCrest, there you are. Okay, so why do I like SilverCrest? SilverCrest brought their Las Chispas mine in Mexico into full commercial production back here in November. Had a very nice run until February, similar to the gold situation. Had a correction and has blasted off ever since. And what makes this Las Chispas silver mine so impressive to me is that it's a gold and silver mine with very high grades and very low costs of production. This makes for a very high margin mining operation. And the high margin producers are often the ones that significantly outperform their peers. Now, in the early days of a new commercial production, it often takes a couple quarters for the bean counters at these big institutions to see how the numbers play out. And I think they're gonna find that they play out to very low cost production relative to their peers and a very high grade, making for very high margins that create a lot of free cash flow, and they can do a lot of great things with that free cash flow. And again, these are the kind of companies that significantly outperform their peers. And so if you're looking for exposure to a gold and silver, for those that have less risk tolerance, this is a perfect candidate. I've reached out to the company on many occasions to try and get an interview with them, and it's been unsuccessful. I wish that they would come on so that I could on the show and do an interview at Rocks and Stocks News, so that my audience could become more aware of SilverCrest. But nonetheless, I'm very bullish on the company, and I think you should do your homework on that company. Now I'm going to get into my other picks, and I'm going to primarily focus on my sponsors. And you know, people will say, "Well, you're talking your book and stuff like that." Well, part of the reason that I focus so much on my sponsors is because they're committed to doing interviews and coming on my shows to explain their story to my audience, showing a tremendous amount of respect for me and my audience. Now, I don't have the biggest audience out there, but after doing this kind of stuff since 2005, I've built up a pretty important audience of very large investors in the mining space, institutional investors, mining company executives, and a group of retail investors that are the kind that like to do their homework. And those are the most attractive to me because they tend to make more logical investment decisions and don't sort of jump in and out of stocks because of the action in the stock price on a daily basis. And I think this is the exact kind of investors and audience that mining companies should be paying attention to. And the major reason is the commitment to telling their stories. You know, as in SilverCrest and other gold stocks, you'll see that a lot of 2022 was a tough year until around November. But it's made even tougher if you pull in your horns and you don't want to tell your story. So nobody really understands you. And if we go into the bull market that I'm going to see, guess which ones are the first to react when the boats all start being lifted? It's the ones that have been aggressively out there telling their stories and doing good work on their projects and acquiring good assets. And so that commitment to me and my audience is very important. And another important reason is I'm able, by doing these interviews, to ask all the right questions so that when I talk about these companies, I have the most insight into the sponsors of my shows that you can see on my screen here. I'll just stop sharing for a second there. All of these sponsors, I'm fortunate to be able to interview them lots, so I know their stories very well. And some of my picks, I reach out to them and they don't respond and they don't want to do interviews, and so they kind of stay as just picks. And because I can't gain as much knowledge of them as I do my sponsors. So yes, I am biased. Yes, I talk my book, but I talk my book because I've done so much homework on these companies, and I believe they're very undervalued. Okay, so some of those picks are, earlier I talked about i-80 Gold and Paycore. Paycore is being bought out by i-80 Gold. There's a company that owns the project immediately to the south of i-80 Gold and Paycore, and it's a company called Golden Lake Exploration. They're a sponsor of my show, and I'm also an advisor to the company. And I think that they've got the potential to make or be a very strong performer and follow in the footsteps of the success that i-80 Gold and Paycore are having. Now, Golden Lake Exploration has already drilled into a high-grade CRD with high grades of silver, lead, and zinc, and an overprint of high grade to bonanza grade gold. Now, they don't have as many holes into that CRD as your Paycore and i-80 Gold do, but they're getting ready to crank up the drilling and chase after that. Now, they also have recently put out some news about this project that they have has seen a lot of historical mining on it back when this was an important, Eureka was an important CRD mining camp from the 1860s to the 1960s. And their particular property had a lot of historical mining on it of these high bonanza grade CRDs. So they did, there was a bunch of surface sampling, and sure enough, they found a bunch of mineralization of high grade silver, lead, zinc, and gold. So that tells you that they have the potential to find more of these CRDs. So their future drilling, I think, will focus in on the known bonanza grade CRD, and then looking for other CRDs that are similar, and this will all be done in a camp that is being revived by i-80 Gold and Paycore. So they have a very tiny valuation, under $10 million. I believe very strongly in what their potential is to deliver with the drilling in the not too distant future. They'll be cranking up that truth machine. And I see all the indications of what they have already drilled into, the expansion potential of that along strike and at depth, as well as the potential to find more of these CRDs. So Golden Lake Exploration, oh, I forgot to bring up their stock chart. I'm very sorry. Golden Lake Exploration, there you go. So as you can see, they followed a very similar path to i-80 Gold. They bottomed in November at around 4.5 cents. They had an aggressive move up to 15 cents. In February, as gold stocks were getting punished, they actually showed a lot of relative strength here, in that they've kind of went sideways in February and March. They're trading right in between their 200-day and their 50-day. And I think that the next big move will be to the upside, because they'll be getting ready to do drilling for their own CRD, expansion of their known CRD, and looking for others. And so Golden Lake is another one you should have a look at. All right. Another company also in the in this Eureka camp is Timberline Resources. And their stock has been under a lot of pressure since back in March, when they topped out. And, you know, oftentimes I see these kind of stories, and it boggles my mind that they can get so oversold. And I believe this company is dramatically oversold. They already have a resource on one part of their property of gold that looks like it's got the potential to being 1 to 3 million ounce kind of thing. What really excites me about that is, as you look at the distribution of the gold, it's all moving towards the east. And you look at the faulting, which is the conduit that the gold fluids, the gold-bearing fluids make their way up to surface, are all going to the east. All the rock packages are going to the east. And not very far from the resource is this really big geophysical anomaly. And I think that that geophysical anomaly is likely the source of the resource that they have been drilling. And it's pretty big resource. And it looks like it's got the potential that it could be getting richer as they move towards the east, towards that big geophysical anomaly. But that's not the only project that they have. Right beside Paycore and in close proximity to I-80 Gold, they have what's called their New York Canyon project. And what's interesting about New York Canyon is that it also had a lot of historical mining on it. And it has the same faulting network as Paycore and I-80 Gold. They did a bunch of surface sampling, and sure enough, they got that CRD mineralization with silver, lead, zinc, as well as gold in it. And so this tells me that they've got a hell of a potential to find something similar to what Paycore and I-80 Gold are finding. And they recently announced that they're getting ready to start their 2023 drilling. And the first project that they're going to drill is New York Canyon. I'm very optimistic, and I think that they have all the indicators that you could ask for that are pointing towards them making important discoveries on their own project for bonanza grade CRDs as well. They are a sponsor of my shows, my reports, and I've done a bunch of interviews. In fact, I recently did one with Patrick from the company. He's their CEO, and you can find that on my YouTube channel at Rocks and Stocks News, or also on my Substack at rocksandstocks.substack.com. Okay, another company in Nevada is Walker River Resources. I like Walker River Resources. They're also a sponsor of my show. And what I believe that this one is another one that's significantly oversold. And the reason that I say that they're significantly oversold is I think that they have a 2 to 5 million ounce potential gold target on their hands. At their La Pond Mountain, they've found from side to side in the mountain widespread high grade to bonanza grade gold over about 600 meters from side to side. In drilling and also in historical mining. And then from top to bottom on the mountain, they found about another 800 meters of widespread gold and silver mineralization. There's a network of faulting going up the side of this mountain. And those faults, again, are very important as they are conduits for how the gold-bearing fluids make their way from very deep up towards the surface. Now, when those fluids hit the country rock, they will chemically alter that country rock. And you can see on the side of this mountain a big area of alteration. And it's not just the mountain that's exciting, but as you get towards the bottom of the mountain, the faults all seem to be coalescing right at a point where there's a cross-cutting fault. And right at that, where they all intersect, is the most intense alteration on the entire project. So not only do I think that they've got a great situation in the mountain, I think they've got one at the bottom of the mountain that could go a lot deeper. In fact, you go up the other side, there's another mountain on the other side of this canyon and major fault, and you see this faulting and also alteration and historical mining. So I think that this one is, it's hard to find multi-million ounce gold targets anywhere in the world, let alone in the best mining camp in the world, which is Nevada. And I think that's exactly what they have on their hands. It would not surprise me that, earlier I was talking about major mining companies getting involved with juniors, and that I've seen a trend that there's very junior friendly deals being done by the majors. It would not surprise me at all if in the not too distant future you see one of those kind of junior friendly deals done as a joint venture with one of these major mining companies that would then go in there and really crank up the drilling and show the entire potential of that project. WRR is their symbol. Okay, also in Nevada is Blackrock Silver. Now, I recently also had an interview with Blackrock CEO Andrew Pollard, and this is another one that I see as very oversold. They've already got a significant resource of silver of about 50 million ounces in Nevada near the town of Tonopah. And it has a very high grade to it, and it's wide open to get a lot bigger. In fact, the signs that they have got, it is getting bigger, is they've been doing some extension drilling along strike, and it looks like that they've pretty much doubled the footprint of the resource. So it could get a lot bigger. I think it will get a lot bigger. And another thing that they can do to increase the ounces in their resources, now that they've learned so much about the system from all the drilling that they did, is they can focus in on the highest grade portions of that and expand on that. And that's a great way to increase the resource quite dramatically. Now, another exciting thing is that a few months ago, when I invited the company to be a sponsor of my reports, and they graciously accepted, we did an interview because they had made an announcement that they had drilled on their Silver Cloud project to the north of Tonopah, and they hit a bonanza grades of silver and gold on an epithermal vein system in an area where there are some world-class high-grade epithermal vein mines. And there they hit they had a 1.5 meter intersection of 70 grams per ton of gold and over 600 grams per ton of silver. Now, in an epithermal vein project, what you need to find is the boiling zone of the epithermal vein. There's zonation of grade in these epithermal veins from at depth and along strike. And so when a company hits the boiling zone of an epithermal vein, it's a major milestone, because then they can expand on that. And when you have a very high grade epithermal vein, they tend to turn into very highly profitable mines. They have low cost to produce, high grades, making for high margins and a lot of free cash flow. So if you're following an epithermal vein project, when they hit that bonanza grade stuff is very important. And so now they've got a resource in Tonopah, and at their Silver Cloud project, they've hit the boiling zone of an epithermal vein. Now they're getting ready to expand on that and do more drilling at their Silver Cloud project and their Tonopah project, which gives them excellent exposure to gold and silver. But then they've also got an interest in a lithium project that they've joint ventured out to another company. And I heard that I listened to an interview with the guy who runs that company, and it sounds like they could have news out at any time. So Blackrock Silver is a catalyst-rich company that I think can have news out any day now and for the rest of the year. And I do believe that they're very undervalued at their current valuation. All right. Another tiny company that is so tiny, Stock Charts doesn't even have them on their list, is a company called Athena Gold. And recently I did an interview and wrote some reports on Athena Gold because they became a sponsor of my website or my reports in January. And why I invited them is they're in the Walker Lane trend in Western Nevada, which is starting to get very exciting because AngloGold Ashanti is building mines and finding resources and spending hundreds of millions of dollars near the Bullfrog mining camp in the Walker Lane Trend, which is about 50 miles to the south of Athena Gold project. And why I like Athena Gold so much is that they have a project that is in 3 holes into what I consider bonanza grades foreign orogenic gold or foreign oxide gold deposit. Now, what I mean by that is a lot of oxide mines these days are mined at under a gram, even in the half a gram per ton kind of numbers. But these guys are hitting in their 3 recent drill holes, they hit multi-grams, even up to 15 grams per ton of gold. So this is orders of magnitude higher grade than the average oxide mine out there. So then you start looking at why they could have a big target. And to the north of where they drilled and to the south of where they drilled, there's this big faulting area, okay? And in the middle of that fault, there's a big area of alteration. So again, the fluids that carry the gold, they make their way up through the faults. And then when they get to the surface, they chemically alter the country rock. So where you find these big plumbing systems or faults or cracks in the earth, and then you find alteration, is a good place to look for gold mineralization. And that's what they found and where they found it. And there's a vast area of this alteration in between these 2 faults that remains to be drilled. This company has a microscopic valuation, and I think that they're dramatically oversold and super cheap. And I know how hard it is to find oxide mines in Nevada. You know, a lot of them have been picked over very well over the last 40 years or so. But Athena has one that's been hidden there. And I think they're in the process of finding it. And I like their chances to have a very important discovery of oxide gold and the potential for other metals even deeper into that system. So Athena Gold symbol is ATHA, and they trade on the Canadian Securities Exchange. Another new sponsor that is in Nevada is a company called Masivo Silver. MASS is their stock symbol on the Venture Exchange. I just did an interview in the last 10 days with them. And the standout points to me are they have their project in Nevada has seen historical mining back around World War II. And it was very high grade mining. And then there wasn't really a lot of work until a few decades ago when there was some minimal drilling, but the team at Masivo Silver believes that the angle of the holes that they drilled were not correct considering the mineralization zones. And so they went in there and drilled in the angled holes in the opposite directions. And sure enough, have shown that that mineralization is in the orientation that they believe. The second thing they showed was they wanted to see if the mineralization at one of these old mine workings continued deeper, and they showed that as well. Now, another big part of this story is the people involved. Brian Brewer, who I did an interview with and had a great chat with, is he's had some big success in his career because he was involved with Mine Finders. And Mine Finders was one of these overnight success stories that became a huge winner and was bought out. So he knows what to look for to find these important new discoveries. And what really stood out to me in our recent conversation was that, you know, how they're just scratching the surface at this project that had a tremendously high grade mining many decades ago. And he makes a strong case that they could be sitting on a very big discovery. And I think that that's what they have the potential to do, yet they have a very tiny valuation on. Sorry, I forgot to bring up their chart. Masivo is MASS on the Toronto Stock Exchange venture market. And as you can see, they were a patchy trader until they announced their drilling, some of their drilling information at their project in Nevada. They've since come off quite dramatically down here to as low as 12.5 cents, and have recently, come up from there to 14.5 cents. I think this one is very oversold as well, and has the potential to be an excellent performer in the remaining part of 2023. Okay, so now I'm going to move. I talked a lot about my Nevada picks so far because Nevada is such an important mining jurisdiction. And now I'm going to move on to talking about orogenic gold explorers. Why I like orogenic gold explorers so much is that they can be, like you saw at the Fosterville mine in Nevada or in Australia. When they got down to the deeper portions of that orogenic gold system and started drilling into it, they found the Swan Zone. The Swan Zone had spectacularly high grade, very low cost of production, making for tremendous free cash flow. Kirkland Lake, when they were mining it, was one of the lowest cost producers in the gold mining business, and had tremendous free cash flow and a peer leading performance in their stock that ultimately got them bought out and made the shareholders a tremendous amount of money. And I'm always looking for the next Swan Zone. And one of the companies that I think might have one of those is Sokoman Minerals. Sokoman has been poking holes fairly close to surface on their Moosehead project in Newfoundland for a few years now. And then back here, they announced very high grade, bonanza grades of gold in the deepest hole that they ever drilled at the project. And so this is important in these orogenic gold systems because there's a couple things that happen. When you're high in the system, you get more fine-grained gold. And yes, you can get high grades in those fine-grained gold portions of an orogenic gold system, but you need to follow them deeper because then you're getting closer to the heat engine that brought all the fluids that contain the gold up towards the surface through these faults that are cracks in the earth that I always talk about being important. And as you get deeper into the system, you get into this coarse green gold. It always reminds me when I talk about this coarse gold in an orogenic gold system is one of the great ones was Gold Corp in Ontario at their Red Lake mine. When they used to go to the Prospectors and Developers annual conference, they would show, they had specimens of the rock from deeper in the mine, and you could see it just riddled with this coarse gold. And that's where they, at that time, they were mining that deep, over 1,000 meters deep, but very low cost and high grade and high margins and lots of free cash flow. They were, at that time, one of the lowest cost producers of gold in the business. And it was all about getting down to that coarse gold. And I think that Sokoman in their 463 zone have hit that bonanza grade jewelry box, we call it in the mining business. And now they're drilling more holes into it, and they have pending assay results from that. In addition to that project, they also have a lithium project that I have very high hopes for. They recently bottomed in here at about 18 cents. I think that they're very undervalued. You're getting it close to their 52-week low. And with all the catalysts that I see coming, especially from the 463 zone drilling, I'm very optimistic that they could have a blast off moment at any time, and they could have assay results out at any time as well. Another sponsor of my shows is a company called Galantas Gold, and they're also looking for orogenic gold, in this case in Ireland. For those that have been long-term in my audience will know that the only other company I picked in Ireland was a company called Dalradian. Dalradian ultimately started covering them at about 25 cents, and they were ultimately bought out at several multiples of that. And now in Galantas, I think I've found another one that could be on that kind of trajectory. Galantas is they've got a very interesting network of orogenic gold zones. They're in very close proximity to each other. And what I think is happening here is they're only in the first couple hundred meters of the top of an orogenic gold system. And as I said earlier, following these orogenic gold systems down to depth is how you find a Swan zone or the Bonanza Gold at the Red Lake mine of Gold Corp. And again, the reason is that as you're in the top part of the system, you're farthest away from the heat engine that brought all of those fluids up towards the surface. The interesting thing about these orogenic gold systems is that they can go down for 2, 3, 4,000 meters. And they're often associated with these deep cracks in the earth. They're called crustal faults. And these deep cracks in the earth are how the fluids make their way up. So as they're close to surface, they've got the Joshua vein, the Kearney vein, and some other associated veins in very close proximity to each other. And also an interesting part is they've hit high grade to bonanza grade in the fine-grained portion of that gold system. And they also have these dilation zones, and these are where the zones will open up and allow those fluids to make deposits. And so they've got a network of these dilation zones, a network of veins, and a network of high grade to bonanza grade gold close to surface. And to the immediate south of that series of zones that they have is one of these big crustal cracks in the earth. And I think that all of these zones are associated to that big crack in the earth. So as they go deeper, there's a high potential that these veins or these zones or veins come together at depth. And that is the real home run potential for this company, is that I think they've got the potential to find Swan zones or bonanza zones like at the Red Lake mine in Ontario as they keep following these veins or zones deeper. And I think that they'll come together as they get deeper, and they'll be associated with this big crack in the earth that's to the immediate south of those veins. And so the depth is the real story for me on Galantas Gold. And recently they did a private placement that I participated in because I'm very optimistic of what they can do when they drill deeper. But an added bonus is that they acquired a few months ago a VMS, a volcanogenic massive sulfide project in Scotland that's been underexplored for decades. Probably forever. I'm very optimistic about the potential of that discovery. And I'm working on getting an interview with Mario Stefano, who's the president of the president CEO of the company. In fact, go to my YouTube channel and you'll find past interviews that I've done with Mario from Galantas. And yeah, here's another one that I think is very oversold. Recently had a triple bottom. And I think that now that they've recently done a pretty substantial financing, that they can get into and start drilling off deeper into their orogenic gold system, and also start making some news from their VMS project in Scotland. And I'm going to get Mario Stefano on a show very soon so we can talk about all the work that they're doing, and I can make the case of why I put money in their recent private placement. All right. Another company that I'm very bullish on in the orogenic gold system story and exploration story is a company called Dynasty Gold. Dynasty Gold has made a important discovery that I don't think the market really understands how significant it is. But I'll tell you what happened just in the last couple of days is they announced that they're doing a private placement that I will also be participating in. And I have good company in that Rob McEwen is the lead order for that $2.8 million financing. He's putting $1.2 million into the company. And what's exciting about this project is that I believe that they are on the top of a swan zone and may have already drilled into a swan zone like at Fosterville or the bonanza zones that were found at Gold Corp. And this is another reason why Rob McEwen investing in the company is so important, because under Rob McEwen's leadership, Gold Corp found those bonanza zones at depth, mined it, and were one of the lowest cost producers and highest margin and free cash flowing machines of all the gold mining companies at the time, which made them one of the best performing gold mining stocks. And so if anybody understands orogenic gold systems, it's Rob McEwen. Now, why I think that they're very underappreciated for what they've found in an orogenic gold system is, not only do I want to see so there's some key points to an orogenic gold system. You need the faulting. On the northern end of the fault, they have this big regional fault. And right through the middle of their claims, they have another one. So again, those are the conduits or the path of least resistance, the big cracks in the earth that are crustal and go down very deep, that these high-grade fluids with gold in them make their way towards the surface. So you need the faulting. You need them to be in these greenstone belts. These certain age of rocks are very important. They've got that on their project. In fact, right where the fault that goes through their property intersects the greenstone belt is where they found what is the most important part of an orogenic gold system, is when you start hitting high grade to bonanza grade. Now, when you find high grade to bonanza grade, then the question that you have to answer is, does it have continuity? So then you have to look at the distribution of the gold in the drill holes. So there's 4 drill holes that one's a historical hole that had high grade at the closest to surface. Then you step over slightly, another hole had high grade in it as well. Then you step over from that, and about 50 meters, the total would be about 75, 80 meters, and they hit bonanza grade gold. They hit a 3-meter intersection of 151 grams per ton of gold, and included in that was 1.5 meters at 246 grams per ton of gold. So now you've got 3 holes lining up. They got another hole, and they hit high grade there as well. So you've got 4 holes now that have continuity of high grade to bonanza grade gold. So that's exactly what you want to see in an orogenic gold system. So then, interesting enough, is one of those holes went deep enough and it caught a second zone of 1.5 meters of 60 grams per ton of gold. So now it looks like they've got one zone here that has continuity and the start of a second one down here, about 40 meters below it. And it looks like they're both going in a direction where they'll meet as they keep drilling deeper into the continuity of these two zones, which brings up another question. Well, if there's two, could there be more? And that, in fact, is highly likely. So it looks like they've got stacked sheets of orogenic gold with high grade to bonanza grade gold, and they need to keep following that deeper. And that gets very exciting because even in the fine grain portion of an orogenic gold system, they're already getting bonanza grades. So now as they follow it deeper, they've got the potential to find the coarse gold, and that then the grades can go off the charts. And again, earlier I was talking about an orogenic explorer, and it reminded me of the difference in your zones. Like, for example, at Gold Corp, the Red Lake mine was mined fairly close to surface for about 20 years or more. And that was in the fine grain portion, gold grain portion of an orogenic gold system. Then they got deeper, about 1,000 meters deep, and they found the coarse gold portion of an orogenic gold system. And it was phenomenal. I remember the days when I would go to the PDAC and they would have a display booth, and in the display booth, they showed off some of the rock from the deep mining, and it was just loaded with coarse gold. It looked like it probably is on the internet somewhere. Just look for Gold Corp gold specimens or something like that. It was the most spectacular gold rock that I've ever seen in my life in the mining business. And that's the way the zonation of grade goes in these orogenic gold systems. High in the system, you get the fine grain gold. Deeper, you get the coarse grain gold as you move closer to the heat engine that caused all of this gold mineralization. And in the fine grain portion of the orogenic gold system, Dynasty is already getting bonanza grades. And as they go deeper, I think it's only going to get more and more exciting, which is why I am really happy that to see Rob McEwen sort of give his good housekeeping seal of approval. He knows what important orogenic gold exploration projects look like. He had one on his hands before. The fact that he's putting 1.2 million into Dynasty, I think, is a very good sign that they have something special. Okay, now I'm going to move on to base metals. And my base metal, one of my top base metal pick actually is a company called 9 Mile Metals. 9 Mile Metals is in the Bathurst mining camp of New Brunswick. It's one of the most important VMS mining camps in the world. It's the third most important VMS mining camp in the world. But a lot of the work in that area was done in the 60s and 70s and 80s. They really haven't, well, it didn't go through modern exploration, and there's been a lot of advancements in geophysics and using big data to filter out geophysical noise to vector into where you should be drilling for new discoveries. And that's in fact what they've done. They've been using these big data from a company called EarthX to vector into where they should be drilling, and they drilled into a new massive sulfide occurrence in this important mining camp, and using that methodology. And back here, they blasted off when they were talking about their 9 Mile Brook discovery. It's a thick lens that comes right to surface, daylights, 10 to 20 meters thick, and it had up 10 to 20% copper in it as well. and also zinc, lead, silver, gold. And so this is an important discovery that, it's quite surprising that the company only has an $18 million valuation, considering that they've secured a very large and important claim blocks in this important mining camp, and are going in there with new technology, new mining exploration methods, and finding new massive sulfide occurrences. And then they went 20 kilometers to the west of the 9 Mile Brook lens, and they found another group of massive sulfide occurrences that come very close to surface as well. And both of those, the source of where those came from has not been found yet. They are currently drilling and near that 9 Mile Brook lens to try to find the source or any other massive sulfide occurrences around it. And recently, they bottomed out here recently at about 16 cents. Then they put out an announcement that they have sent off about 700 meters of core from their drilling, and look at this blast off that it had. Now, why that's important is that massive sulfides are very easy to see in the drill core. And the fact that they sent in 700 meters of core for rush assaying tells me that they saw some pretty impressive massive sulfides in that core that they recently submitted. So I think they've got some good news in them, and I don't think it'll be too far away, because they're using a lab in Moncton that's not very busy. The big delays in assay results are actually in the sample preparation, and by using a smaller lab to do the sample preparation, they then send the concentrate to the big lab, and they do the assaying. The assaying happens very quickly. It's actually the sample preparation that's the problem. So I think that they could come out in the next 2 to 3 weeks with the assays from the core that they rushed for rush assaying. And I'm very optimistic that they can deliver some excellent results. And considering that they have a sub $20 million valuation, I think that puts them in a great chance to be have a blast off moment. Okay, my company, Advanced Lithium, where I'm the CEO and a large shareholder, has 3 important projects that I don't think are being fairly reflected in the price of the stock. One of those projects is in Mexico. It's a lithium, actually it's a series of 13 lithium and potassium bearing salars or salt lakes. We got under a lot of pressure over here because the Mexican government was talking about creating a national lithium company. And when investors heard that, they headed for the exits, because what they heard was nationalizing. And that's not quite accurate, in that they actually have started a national lithium company called LithiumX, or LithiumX. And here, as you can see, we had a pretty significant breakout. And the reason for that breakout was that we announced that we had started discussions with LithiumX about the possibility of doing a joint venture to advance our lithium and potassium salars towards possible near-term mining. And the reason I can say that with some confidence, the near-term part, is that the lithium and potassium mineralization starts right under your feet when you walk on these salt lakes. And so that makes for very easy to start producing. You start digging it up and putting it in a dump truck, and you send it off for processing. Now, what also is important about our projects is that we have the rights to use a unique extraction method that is patent pending. And what this does is it uses electrical separation to separate the lithium, potassium, and water from the rest of the material. And then you're left with the concentrate that you can put in an organic compound to separate the water from the lithium and the potassium. Then you're left with pure lithium and potassium. And actually, in the case of the potassium, it's sulfate of potash, which is significantly more expensive than than potassium. And so this process, what makes it quite unique is that you need low power source. You don't need roasting and hundreds of degrees in order to extract the lithium from other minerals. The lithium and potassium is not bound up in other minerals. So the electrical recovery is very easy, and it will use a low power source. And you could use solar power to power the electrical separation portion of it. And then you would put it through an organic compound, which you could then recycle the water over and over and over again, which is very important because in other clay deposits, you need to use a roaster and lots of water and lots of chemicals for liberation of the acid liberation of the lithium from the other minerals it's contained in. These are very costly operations, whereas our simple flow sheet with electrical recovery and recyclable water uses not very much water and low energy sources. So it's really, I say it's a green mining solution for a green energy source. And but that's not our only project. Also in Mexico, we have a Serape, which is 55 square kilometers right beside SilverCrest Las Chispas mine. And it's Las Chispas is an epithermal vein mine. We've got an epithermal veins that have only seen a handful of drilling on them and have not hit the boiling zone of those epithermal veins as of yet. We're making a plan to go in there and do that. And if we hit a boiling zone on a vein right beside an important mine like Las Chispas, and to the south of that is the Ermitaño mine of First Majestic, and it could be a serious game changer and gives us exposure to gold and silver exploration in a tremendously important mining camp for those metals. And we've got a big land package right beside a few important mines. There's mines all around us. And so Serape gives us excellent exposure to gold and silver. But then we've also got a project that we just announced in early March called the Bathurst Mining Camp Project in New Brunswick. We've acquired 170 square kilometers of ground in the Brunswick Mining Camp from Wolfden Resources. There is 7 known historical resources that were done prior to National Instrument 43-101. So they're called non-compliant, but they were done by good work. They just need to be reported on based on the current reporting standards. Nonetheless, we will be using those as exploration areas all around those known resources. And one of those resources, 25 million tons with handsome grades of zinc and other metals. And I think what's crucially important about that, it's a 25 million ounce resource, non-compliant, pre-43-101. But the analysis by the geologists is that that's actually the debris flow, and the primary VMS source of that has not been found yet. So we're going to use some drone geophysics to go and light up all these targets and look for the source of that Canoe Landing Lake resource, do other exploration to the north of that, to the northwest of that. Wolfton had actually found epithermal veins with very high grades of silver in them. So we know there's epithermal veins, that the boiling zones of those epithermal veins have already been found. Expansion of those and looking for more of those will be important. And then we've got three big claims, or a big claim block right beside the Brunswick number 6 and the Brunswick number 12 mine. Brunswick number 12 is one of the elephants in the VMS mining world. It had a size of 300 million tons. They mined 150 million tons of that, and they actually had to stop because the rock conditions at depth back then were too unsafe. And so it didn't run out of ore. It got down to too unsafe of a depth, but that's a monster of a massive sulfide occurrence. And we've got a group of projects right in close proximity, and I've done some of the structural analysis, and these structures are important to VMSs because they work as a conduit, and there's a whole series of structures right on our project that it's really been unexplored. So I'm really excited about what I call our eastern claim blocks in the Bathurst Mining Camp project. So that's the advanced lithium story. I'm sorry I droned on there, but I think we've got three excellent projects that could be company makers of their own, and we only have about a $4 million valuation. So take a look at advanced lithium. Another brand newly printed sponsor is Summa Silver. Summa Silver, hold on here, let me get them up, has two excellent projects where they found very high grades of silver and gold on their project in New Mexico. And I actually wrote a report on them not too long ago, last week. You can find it on my Substack at rocksandstocks.substack.com, where I welcome them to becoming a new sponsor. And I provided cross sections of their mineralization, their table of results with all the pending holes, drill core, plan maps, the whole works is in that report. So instead of me repeating it now, I would like to invite you to go to my Substack at rocksandstocks.substack.com, scroll down and you'll find the welcome report that I wrote about Summa Silver. And in addition to the project in New Mexico, they also have a project in Tonopah, Nevada. And you'll find in that same report a table of the past drilling with just bonanza grades in an epithermal vein system. So they've got two great projects. They've got more assay results come from New Mexico. Then they're going to be starting drilling at Tonopah, and then they're going to get back to drilling in New Mexico. So they're going to have a lot of news out over the next few months. And in fact, next week, I'm working towards getting an interview, our initial interview with Summa Silver. And so stay tuned for that. Bell Copper is not a sponsor of my reports, but I have done interviews with their management. They do have a high respect for my shows. So when I ask them to come on to explain things, Tim Marsh is very kind to do that. So I have a lot of respect for them because they have respect for our shows and our audience. They're in Arizona and they're looking for an elephant in Arizona, and they have clipped that elephant with some of their past drilling, And now they're drilling into the guts of a geophysical anomaly. And I have a lot of respect for Tim. Tim has worked on some of the important big deposits in Arizona. He lives down there. He knows the area very well. And they've kind of been having a nice little trend since back here. They bottom, higher low, higher lows. Had a little bit of a breakout on Friday. They're drilling, and I think they're at the depth where any day now they could start hitting the alteration halo around a big copper porphyry. So what happens again is when you get close to a deposit, the fluids that bring those metals up towards near surface, they will chemically alter the country rock around them. And so you get these alteration zones near the deposit itself. So the first thing that their drilling will do is encounter alteration. And Tim knows what that looks like. And then it gets really exciting because you go through the alteration, and the bigger the alteration tells you the bigger the potential deposit is below that. And they are really looking for a massively big deposit based on the geophysics and the geology. And they're in Arizona, where a lot of these big elephant deposits are found. I'm very optimistic. I'm keeping my fingers crossed for Bell Copper. I think that they could have an elephant on their hands. And not too long ago, I did an interview with Tim Marsh from the company, and I highly recommend you check that out because we had a great chat about why they have good potential to make a big discovery on their project in Arizona. Alrighty, folks, that's the end of my long show today. I thank you for joining me. As always, do your homework, speak with your financial advisors to assess whether any company I talk to or anybody you're listening to, whether those companies are fit into your risk profile. And for any company, including the ones that I talk about, do your homework. Check these companies' websites out, look at their news releases, look at their corporate presentations. All the companies that I talk to, except for a couple on the show today, I've done interviews with that you can find on my YouTube channel at Rocks and Stocks News, or you can also find plenty of interviews and written reports on my Substack at rocksandstocks.substack.com, where you can learn more about the companies that I follow. Do that homework. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.